Welcome to two excerpts read from 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. The first excerpt is called A Slave Auction, and the second is called No Rest. Solomon Northup is our narrator. He was kidnapped as an adult and forced into slavery. This excerpt describes a slave auction where men and women are shown no respect. Northup was a free black man who lived in Minerva, New York, and he was kidnapped at the age of 33. The title comes from the idea that he did endure 12 years of bondage in Louisiana when his wife and New York State officials were finally able to gain him his freedom. He published a memoir called The 12 Years in a Slave in 1853. And this is our first excerpt. Mr. Theophilus Freeman bustled about in a very industrious manner, getting his property ready for the salesroom, intending, no doubt, to do that day a rousing business. In the first place, we were required to wash thoroughly, and those with beards to shave. We were then furnished with a new suit each, cheap but clean. The men had hat, coat, shirt, pants, and shoes. The women frocks of calico and handkerchiefs to bind about their heads. The men were arranged on one side of the room, the women on the other. The tallest was placed at the head of the row, then the next tallest, and so on, in the order of their respective heights. He would then make us four hold up our heads, walk briskly back and forth, while customers would feel of our hands and arms and bodies, turn us about, ask us what we could do, make us open our mouths and show our teeth, precisely as a jockey examines a horse which he is about to barter for or purchase. During the day, a number of sales were made. Lethe was sold to a planter of Baton Rouge, her eyes flashing with anger as she was led away. The same man also purchased Randall. The little fellow was made to jump and run across the floor and perform many other feats, exhibiting his activity and condition. All the time the trade was going on, Eliza was crying aloud and wringing her hands. She besought the man not to buy her son, unless he also bought herself and Emily, her daughter. She promised in that case to be the most faithful slave that ever lived. The man answered that he could not afford it, and that Eliza then burst into grief, weeping plaintively. Freeman turned round to her savagely, with his whip in his uplifted hand, ordering her to stop her noise or he would flog her. He would not have such work, such sniveling, and unless she ceased that minute, he would take her to the yard and give her 100 lashes. And this is the second excerpt, No Rest. The hands are required to be in the cotton field as soon as it is light in the morning, and with the exception of 10 or 15 minutes, which is given them at noon to swallow their allowance of cold bacon, they are not permitted to be a moment idle until it is too dark to see. And when the moon is full, they oftentimes labor till the middle of the night. They do not dare to stop even at dinner time, nor return to their quarters, however late it be, until the order to halt is given by the driver. The day's work over in the field, the baskets are toted, or in other words, carried to the gin house, where the cotton is weighed. No matter how fatigued and weary he may be, no matter how much he longs for sleep and rest, a slave never approaches the gin house with his basket of cotton, but with fear. If it falls short in weight, if he has not performed the full task appointed to him, he knows that he must suffer. And if he has exceeded it by 10 or 20 pounds, in all probability, his master will measure the next day's task accordingly. So, whether he has too little or too much, his approach to the gin house is always with fear and trembling. Most frequently, they have too little, and therefore it is they are not anxious to leave the field. After weighing, follow the whippings, and then the baskets are carried to the cotton house, and their contents stored away like hay, all hands being sent in to tramp it down. If the cotton is not dry, instead of taking it to the gin house at once, it is laid upon platforms 2 feet high, with some 3 times as wide, covered with boards or planks, with narrow walks running between them. This done, the labor of the day is not yet ended by any means. Each one must then attend to his respective chores. One feeds the mules, another the swine, another cuts the wood, and so forth. Besides, the packing is all done by candlelight. Finally, at a late hour, they reach the quarters sleepy and overcome with the long day's toil. Then a fire must be kindled in the cabin, the corn ground in the small hand mill, and supper and dinner for the next day in the field prepared. All that is allowed them is corn and bacon, which is given out at the corn crib and smokehouse every Sunday morning. Each one receives, as his weekly allowance, 3.5 pounds of bacon and corn enough to make a peck of meal. That is all. No tea, coffee, sugar, and with the exception of very scanty sprinkling now and then, no salt. An hour before daylight, the horn is blown. Then the slaves arouse, prepare their breakfast, fill a gourd with water, in another deposit their dinner of cold bacon and corn cake, and hurry to the field again. It is an offense invariably followed by a flogging to be found at the quarters after daybreak. Then the fears and labors of another day begin, and until its close, there is no such thing as rest. In the month of January, generally, the fourth and last picking is completed. Then commences the harvesting of the corn. Plowing, planting, picking cotton, gathering the corn, and pulling and burning stalks occupies the whole of the 4 seasons of the year. Drawing and cutting wood, pressing cotton, fattening and killing hogs are but incidental labors.